Welcome to Flight Level Zero. It all starts here. I'm Joe Peebles, your host. Welcome to the show. All right, if you're a veteran and you are in need of help, you need somebody to talk to, please call the Veterans Crisis Line, dial 988 and press 1. Everything's confidential. They just want to get you help. What you are going through is a unique situation that only service members and their families understand. So please reach out to the people who get it. Flight Level Zero is brought to you by our sponsor, JP Aerotechnics. JP Aero is a AOG mobile maintenance provider that provides services for Part 135 and Part 91 business jet operators. We provide quick and reliable service to the southern USA. From Nashville to Panama City, Charleston out to Memphis. We can be there. If you have a downed aircraft, you have MELs, or just need someone to do some service checks regularly, please call us. We can support you. Call 833-807-3131 or just email us at aog@jpaerotechnics.com. So if you're new to the show, you don't know what we talk about here, this is Flight Level Zero, and we talk about self-development, and we talk about the aviation industry, primarily the business aviation industry. So there's three topics that we usually have on stage here. We've got we talk to aviation professionals and we talk about their journey. We talk about self-development and how to become a dominating factor in your life and in your industry. We also talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly parts of life and tools that can help you overcome those hard times because they will inevitably come. We have three types of shows. We have full-length episodes, which today is a full-length episode where I bring on a guest. We talk about their story. We get to know them and hopefully get to pull a couple of nuggets out of their life story to help us on our journey. Then we have solos where it's just me for 10 to 15 minutes. We haven't done one of those in a while. So I'll be making sure that we prime that up and get some of those in. But 10, 15 minutes of me talking about a few things that I've learned in the industry or in life or whatever I feel like ranting about that day. So I apologize in advance for those. And then we also have Q&A discussions. I need you guys to ask me questions so that we can answer it. We haven't done a Q&A yet, specifically because we don't get any questions. If you have any questions about the aviation industry or just life in general, please DM me on LinkedIn. You guys know where it's at. And pretty soon we're going to have a website up for Flight Level Zero. Really excited about that. That's coming soon, where you can send us messages and ask us questions that we can answer on the show. I'd love to help you guys out. If I don't know the answer, I probably know somebody who can. And if you ask a good question, I'll bring somebody on that has the answer. We can answer that question for you. So looking forward to that. If you do like the show, if it makes you think, if it makes you smile, if you think we did a good job, please like and share it. Let other people know about it. That's the way that we get support. That's how we beat the algorithm. That's how we get out there. And that's how we get to the people that need to hear this message. So thank you very much for supporting our brand, and we greatly appreciate it. A couple updates for the show, guys. If you've been listening for a while, you know that everything has been audio, fully audio for a long time. We are starting a YouTube channel, and so pretty soon you're going to be able to see these conversations that I have. You can see what the other person looks like finally, and you can also see what I look like because that'd probably be a little bit of a surprise to you. But yeah, so we're going to be starting a YouTube channel. I'll let you guys know when that drops. And we're also going to be starting a swag website page that you guys can go out and buy Flight Level Zero gear, hats, hoodies, shirts, stuff like that. We're going to be taking quotes from the show, putting them on shirts and selling them. And I wanted to let you know that parts of the proceeds from any of the swag that is bought on the Flight Level Zero page will go to Hire Vets, which is a nonprofit I started. If you've been listening for a while, you know what that's about. We are trying to help 10,000 veterans transition out of the military successfully and lead productive civilian lives. So parts of the proceeds from that page, anything that you purchase throughout Flight Level Zero, that money will go to helping a veteran either get a scholarship, find a mentor, go through some type of a training program to help them get their 2 feet under them and move forward in life. And I greatly appreciate you guys. I'll let you guys know when that drops. Really excited about it. It'll probably be January 2025 around the time where that drops. Maybe even a little bit before that, you might be able to buy somebody who listens to the show a little gift before Christmas. We'll see how that goes. I'm still trying to figure all this crap out, and it's always been, I'm a both feet in type of guy. I just like jump in and try to figure it out as I go. So yeah. So guys, now that we're done talking business, let's get down to business. Really excited about today. A couple weeks ago, I put out a post on LinkedIn saying, "Hey, if you're in aviation, you want to reach out, please reach out to me." And I don't even think I don't know if that's how you found me or not, but this guy reached out to my phone and called me up and it was like, "Hey, dude, we've got to talk." And so, really excited to bring him. We kind of work in the same circles here in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm really excited to have him on the show. Everybody, I want to introduce you to Rick Scarbrough. How's it going, Rick?
Hey, Joe. Good to be here, brother. Thanks for what you're doing, and thanks for having me on, man. I'm thrilled to be here.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for reaching out. So let's dive right into this, man.
Let's do it.
You are currently, if you look up on LinkedIn, I love the little saying you have right under your name. It says, "We use storytelling to spark collaboration." You're an AMP. You've been in the business for a while, but you're also now a writer. And so I'm really excited about talking to you because writing is a passion of mine, and storytelling is a passion of mine. And you've kind of figured out how to make that work for yourself, not only personally but professionally. And so let's dive into the story, Richard. How did you get? Well, where are you from, first of all, and how did you get interested into aviation?
No, I appreciate it, Joe. I was born into this business. I
Okay.
like to say that I've got 100 low lead in my blood. That's my blood type. 100 low lead.
That's
Um,
awesome.
my dad was a Beechcraft sales guy in the 70s and 80s. So he worked out of a company called Hangar One in what was Atlanta Airport prior to Hartsfield. They had an FBO there, and he was a part sales guy. So he traveled the Southeast and sold Beechcraft parts, and that was my first introduction into airplanes. I would go out on the weekends with him, and we would look at the airplanes on the ramp. He would introduce me some of the mechanics, and there was just nothing cooler to me than to see an airplane in pieces get put back together and then take off flying literally hours later. It still awes me to this day. I walk through a hangar today, and I'm still mesmerized at how these modern marvels, the machinery, can get off the ground and stay airborne. Anybody that doesn't feel their heart rate increase when they walk past a taxi and airplane needs to have their pulse checked, because it's still an absolute thrill for me. Um,
Yeah.
so in high school, I grew up in southwest Atlanta, Georgia. But one of my first jobs was at Sonora Raceway. So my grandfather was the track photographer, and I sold pictures up and down. I was the kid walking up and down in front of the stands with a picture, and I would sell 8x10s of the race cars. Race
Awesome.
cars are a lot like airplanes. They're highly precision, highly technical. The thousandths of an inch could mean disaster or success, and
Mm.
you cannot put a price tag on safety. And so just being around the mechanics and seeing how the machinery worked, working on my own hot rod as a teenager. When I graduated high school, I enlisted in the U.S. Navy and became a sheet metal mechanic. Um,
Awesome.
when I got out, I got my A&P, started working for Delta Airlines on the line. Got caught up in the whole Pan Am thing when they had the reduction in force, so I left the airline business. But I never lost my love for the airplane. So since then, I've been mostly in sales and marketing. Um, and I've owned a couple of companies. I owned a company called Aviation Enterprises. I owned a 145 repair station called Graham Aircraft Engines. And I sold it and went to work for the company I work for now, which is a distribution company called Wincor in Peachtree City. Um, I started my side hustle, my writing business, when I was at Embry-Riddle. And I went to school late in life, graduated at 50 from, sorry about that, an automatic light.
That's all right. No problem.
um, Started out a little later than most. Got my bachelor's degree in aviation maintenance management from Embry Riddle, and we were supposed to write a paper basically every term you had to write a full term paper. And I just loved telling the story of aviation maintenance. I like to tell everybody that what I've pivoted to now is I'm a PR department for airplane mechanics.
Mm.
And Joe, you know as well as I do, airplane mechanics are the top notch at what they do, but they're always in a cowling somewhere, up in a wheel well, in an avionics bay, rewiring things. They don't have time to sit and talk about how they're working on the airplane. So I'm kind of an advocate for those guys and gals that are out there on the flight line, heads deep in an avionics bay, rewiring autopilot. I tell everybody that pilots don't need a PR department. They can stroll through the terminal with their Ray-Bans on, silk scarf, and they just look cool. And rightly so. Flying is a very delicate, very important function. But mechanics are important too. And it's my job, I think, is I've taken the mandate of being able to tell that story for them. So that's my mission, is to raise the level of awareness of aircraft maintenance and just let folks know that what we do every day on the flight line and in the hangar 100% impacts how you fly.
Yeah. And as the mechanic, you're kind of the unsung hero of the mission. Nobody talks about, the pilots are great about saying, "Hey man, great job," but nobody,
sure.
A lot of us aren't out here for the glory anyways. We just like to tinker,
Sure. Sure.
I love fixing airplanes. I kind of got into that space personally because, well, I found that I found my love for this after Afghanistan.
Yeah.
When I got back, the only thing I wanted to do was fix aircraft, work and tinker and stay busy. And I found that one of the ways that I dealt with my PTSD was tinkering. And I, kind of zoned in on it, got really good at it. I got really good at it before, but I really kind of honed in on my craft, stayed very busy. And you don't go out saying, "Hey man, I fixed that." You might talk crap to the other mechanics, sure. I'm the one who figured it out, but nobody knows, the importance of our job. I think that's a great thing that you're out there advocating for us, because there are stories that you'll never hear of stuff that we found
Yep.
on an aircraft that could have potentially ended up in disaster. And we found that issue, rectified it, fixed it, coming out of, you're a sheet metal mechanic, so structures and
Yep.
stuff like that. There's things that you find that nobody will ever know about, other than the documentation that's on that aircraft and the history of it as it goes throughout the lifetime. But it is vital. It is a vital component of aircraft missions, or just aircraft period. The operations of the aircraft is having good maintainers that do a really good job at finding the issues before they become issues. That's why our safety record is so high in the industry, is because it is our job to find and report stuff that is not safe. And I think that is one of the pillars of being an A&P, is being trustworthy. And it's that say something if you see something, aspect. If you see it and you believe it to not be airworthy, until proven that it is, it's not going to leave our site until we get it fixed.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Joe. When I was in A&P school, we had a framed copy of Flight Safety's The Mechanic's Creed, and we were encouraged to read that early and often. And it basically says, if it ain't right, it doesn't go. If you wouldn't put your family in it, it doesn't go. If you felt anything at all squeamish about what you're doing, it doesn't go. I always like to say the pros make it look easy, whether you're performing acrobatics. Some of the best acrobatic pilots make it look effortlessly, and you have no idea what's going on behind that stick. We actually worked on some acrobatic airplane, and I even sponsored an acrobatic flyer one time. So those uneventful flights, Joe, where you take off and land and nothing happened, and you enjoyed your peanuts and maybe watched a movie or had a drink and walked off the airplane unscathed. That's our goal. That's what we shoot for. We want 100% uneventful flights, nice and boring.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. And I was going to do a podcast on this a couple months ago, well, like a year ago. So I had an idea for talking about air disasters, and
Yep.
this conversation brings up one in particular, Nigeria Airways Flight 2120. It was in July of 1991. An aircraft it was a DC-8, took off out of Saudi Arabia, and shortly after caught fire, and started from the wheel well up into the wheel well, and basically the aircraft turned around, but it never made it back. 247 passengers on board, 14 crew members, and that happened because of a tire that had low pressure on it, because the tarmac was so hot. Now, what happened was they had a guy who was an aviation guy running the production side of maintenance, and he pushed the A&P, or it wasn't an A&P, it was a Saudi national, pushed that guy to pencil whip a tire pressure checklist, And when it comes down to the basics, what happened was, because he pushed him and basically threatened his job, they pencil whipped the numbers on the tire pressure. So a low pressure on a tire at the rate of speed that those things move, with the weight from the aircraft plus the heat off of the tarmac, caused that tire to overheat. And when they did the investigation, it went through so many lines of contact, but they finally got to the mechanic, and the mechanic admitted to not filling up the tire.
Right.
And this is where you being an A&P or being a mechanic comes into play, because everybody wants to be that person until you really got to exercise that right of that certificate. And
Sure.
You've got to stand up and say, hey, this is the problem. I think the FAA learned that day, and it's sad that 247 souls plus the 14 crew members had to go because of that. But that's one good thing about aviation as a whole, is we find where we make mistakes and we adjust and try and fix those problems that we found. And when you have a serious mechanic on board on your team, that person takes pride in making sure that those souls make it. And I think everybody does. That guy didn't know that that's what's going to happen. He didn't realize that was something that was going to take place. But unfortunately, having people who don't have that mentality in charge of him ultimately caused him to kind of back down and out of that space. And so I think that a lot of flight departments now emphasize on the safety and make sure that, hey man, if you see it, take care of it.
Yep.
I know when I was a crew chief in the Army, it was like, you find it, you fix it immediately, as soon as possible. You find out how dangerous that is. Can you MEL it? If you can't, you need to get it fixed. The aircraft is down, and it is your responsibility as a mechanic to say, no, this thing's not going to fly.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, Joe, when you said team. I mean, we're all in this together. You've got maintenance control, you've got maintainers on the floor, you've got the flight crew. We all have to be in sync with one another, and we all have to trust one another. And when a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So I don't want maintenance to be that weak link, and I don't want anyone on my team to contribute negatively to a flight or to an aircraft operation. So we preach that day in and day out. I told my guys in the engine shop, I said, if you drop a bolt down in the back of an engine, raise your hand. You will not be disciplined for dropping the bolt. Now, if you cover it up, we will walk you to the door immediately. There will be no coming back. I said, if you drop that bolt in the back of an engine on Friday afternoon and you had plans the next day to go fishing, guess what? You're not fishing.
Right.
We're pulling the back end of the engine off.
Right.
But you will keep your job and you will get paid to pull it apart on Saturday and put it back together again, because that's life. Things happen. But they were absolutely encouraged to bring things forward. When, like you said, if you see something, say something. I was back there one time, and my partner at the time ran the shop. I ran the office, and he had put together hundreds, if not thousands, of engines. And I was just running my hand across one of the magnetos, and there was a big crack in it. And raised my hand. I said, "Hey, this one's no go." And sure enough, it had a crack in it. But I told my guys, I said, don't paint cracks. I said, aircraft maintenance is absolutely not the place for that ain't my job, man. If your job is to tear down, clean, bead blast, and paint, and you see a crack, well, I'm not an inspection. Everybody's an inspector. Everybody's a maintainer.
Absolutely.
Everybody's in charge. I was accountable manager for the shop, but everybody's accountable for their actions
Correct.
and for their brother's actions. If you're rigging one side of a flight control and your counterpart's rigging the other side and the airplane goes out, it's both of you have your name in that logbook. Both of you are on the hook for that airplane. So watch out for me, watch out for him or her, and do what needs doing. So, because like you said, the stakes here are way too high. It's not like an accounting. If we make an error, somebody didn't, loses a couple $100 that week. If we make an error, stakes are higher.
Yeah. Yeah. The lives on board are definitely always on my mind when I'm working on an aircraft. And the one of the ways that I've always kind of looked at it is, can I put my kids on this aircraft after I fix it?
100%.
Would I trust my work enough? And when I was working on helicopters, man, I was itching to go on test flights because I love flying. I was a crew member in the Army, and so
Sure.
I miss it. And so, what better way to make a crew feel safe is like right after I'm done fixing it, I'm going to go on the test flight, and we're going to go fly it
Sure.
around for an hour to make sure that it's good. So yeah, think about that type of stuff. Could Would I be willing to get on this aircraft after I'm done? If you're afraid of heights, like I've got a guy, he's afraid to fly, so he's not going to get on the flight regardless. But I trust his work, and so
Sure.
what we do is he'd do the work with me. Then afterwards, I would go for the flight, just
Yep.
to put my stamp on it and say, yeah, I even got on it and flew it. Let's hop back into your history real quick.
Okay.
Um, so you were in the Navy as a sheet metal technician.
Yep.
Being a sheet metal technician is incredibly precise. You've got hundreds of thousands of inches
Yep.
that you're messing with. You've got, you're drilling holes, you're deburring all this stuff. You're making sure that everything is precise to the fit that we're prescribed in the CFRs and the FARs. And so, how was that learning for you going through the Navy? The Navy's got a fantastic training for sheet metal technicians. I know that.
Oh, it absolutely was. And like I said, what the Navy taught me um, was that I am not the center of the universe. I don't know how you are, Joe, but and this is something that I have to get over when someone says thank you for your service. That makes me a little uncomfortable. And I know they're showing their appreciation, but when they say it to me, my response is I was honored to serve. What my inside voice is saying, look, I got a lot more out of the Navy than they got out of me because they took, I was 17 years old when I joined the Navy, and I was working at a pizza restaurant. And
Mm,
had I not joined the Navy, work, it was a good pizza restaurant, but I probably would have made a career at the pizza restaurant. So
yeah.
they actually gave me, and 35 years later, I'm still in the business thanks to the U.S. Navy. So I will always be appreciative for the time I served. I went through Millington, Tennessee. That's when the Airedales all went through Millington back in the day. This is the late '80s, and you're absolutely right. We were handed sheets of aluminum and a bucket of rivets, and given a diagram to make a wing section. So we had to
Mm,
form the ribs. We had to skin it. We had to put access panels in it. And you're from a kid who's I changed oil and spark plugs, but that's about it as far as maintenance
yeah.
goes. To go from that to building a wing, in A school at the time in Millington was a pretty big deal for me, and I was pretty proud of that. And then the instructors would come by with a punch, and that you could hear them behind you, and they'd be going, and they'd come up, and go, pow, 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 pow. And they took the punch with a hammer and drove bullet holes all in your wing.
Yeah.
And then they looked at you and said, fix it. So you had to cut it out, you had to put a doubler, and then you had to put a patch on top of it. It was all part of it.
Yeah.
So to go from throwing pizzas literally months before that to cutting out the damaged section of bullet holes and putting a doubler and a patch on it, it's pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie to you, Joe. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. And there's a lot of technique. I think I was talking to somebody the other day, and I think it might have been a LinkedIn post, and they were talking about continuous learning and the importance of continuous learning. And I was like, well, understanding how to do something
Hmm.
in your head and actually doing it is you've got to put in some practical training. Like,
Yep.
I didn't learn how to drill straight by reading a book, and I
Sure.
didn't, and I didn't learn how to measure an edge distance for a hole and line up 6 holes in a straight line and make sure that they're perfectly correct by reading a book. It
Yep.
takes practice, and it takes a lot of it.
A
You
lot of
know,
it.
I'm
I
sure
went through a
that
lot of aluminum.
I'm sure you did. Yeah, it's not an easy task.
No.
The thing I loved about sheet metal is it almost helps you be creative. You have like your blueprint, right?
Mhm.
And you've got to figure out how to make this piece of metal transform into this now piece. And I always thought that was really cool. I felt like the guys who were doing sheet metal around me always had like a little way to express themselves through their work,
Sure.
other than me, just taking bolts out, take actuators out, put an actuator in, and bend a cotter key. Like it's
Yep.
it's not as fun. And so I was always drawn to the structure mechanics. Not only that, but they always had like it was like playing chess. They were always like 4 or 5 steps ahead based
Right.
on what they're doing now. And so I was always like intrigued by that. I didn't learn sheet metal until 8, 9 years
Okay.
in my training. I was a mechanic first,
Yeah.
and then learned sheet metal down at Gulfstream. Um,
Yeah. And I started as a sheet metal, and then when I transferred to VA 205, the Green Falcons, I worked in Work Center 120, and we didn't do any sheet metal work because it was an O-level squadron. So I did all hydraulic work. So I was R&R in the actuators at that point. So I had to cross. It was the same. Now it's the same rate. They call them AMTs, but back then you went through an AMH or an AMS route, hydraulic or structures. But they used them interchangeably, so it made sense for them to combine them, which I believe they finally did.
yeah, yeah. So you did your service. You did your time in the service. You were a line tech, and then you moved over to hydraulics and pulling actuators and stuff like that. And you're getting out of the military.
Yep.
So where are we at here? What's happening?
So I was a unique case. I joined something called the Sea Air Mariner program. So I knew when I going in that I would do boot camp. I would go to A school. Then I spent 2 weeks at my duty station in AS Atlanta, and then I transferred immediately into the reserves and started going to A&P school.
Mm,
So that was a program the Navy set up um, to go to college using your Montgomery GI Bill. So it was really a great stepping stone for me. I didn't do 4 years of active Navy prior to going in the reserves. I went into the reserves right out of A school, and
okay.
that kind of jump started my career because I got my A&P within a couple of years. That put me on the track to get on the airlines. Um, and then I traded all of that when I went from the concrete to the carpet and got into sales and marketing. But I never lost my touch or my feeling for aircraft maintenance and working on things. In fact, when I owned my engine shop, you talked about therapy. I would go out and put my earbuds in. Back then, they had iPods. The iPhone wasn't around yet,
Yeah.
so I would get my iPod and I would put it on some kind of rock and roll music, and I would stick my AirPods in, and I would spend a couple of hours tearing down the engines, cleaning the engines. Run if you want to feel a sense of satisfaction, get a set of 12 IO 520 jugs and blast the carbon off of them with glass beads. Man, that will turn your old afternoon on a dime. You can watch. You can sit there. It's like blasting your troubles away. You're just hitting all that carbon with a glass bead wand and watching it dissipate, and it's all shiny when you're done. To me, that's worth the price of admission right there. It's actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. I think there was one time when I was at Gulfstream, we were doing a retrofit of jets, and so they were literally just, and I was learning how to use a cut wheel, and I
Yep.
didn't know how to, and we had like just giant freaking laundry baskets full of angles that had to be cut because they were red tagged. We had to destroy them. And so literally for 2 or 3 days straight, that's all I did was use the cutting wheel and chop these things up. And it was mindless work. But the funny thing is I actually learned really well how to use the cut wheel, not have it bounce on you
Yeah.
and like not have it jump on you and, realize what a cut wheel looks like before it's about to blow up, all
Right.
that
The
stuff.
sound it makes. Yeah.
Yeah, the sound and the sparks that's flying off. You can tell what type of what type of metal you're working with based on the color of sparkage that's coming off of the. I didn't know any of that stuff, and so learning that and going through that, it was just like you're right, man. You kind of just get lost in the sauce, and you're just kind of in it.
Outstanding. I spent some time at ABL's Wheel and Brake Shop, And
Oh,
when we
okay.
took over ASA's wheel shop, we had stacks of wheels that failed eddy current or fluorescent penetrant or they're cracked or whatever. From the naked eye, you couldn't tell that they were cracked, but through NDT inspections, we found out they were cracked. So I had to take a big chisel and a huge ball peen hammer and go into the bearing race of the wheel and smack the hell out of it
Yeah.
and drive a big wedge into it. So to put a visual aspect on this is really a red tag. It keeps somebody from inadvertently hanging a cracked wheel on the airplane because
Yeah.
there's no way that bearing is going to spin now when
For sure.
when they punch a big V right in the bearing race. So that's a good way to take out frustration too. See how hard you can hit it. We'd have guys would have contests to see how you could smack it and what the V would look like when you were done. So that was a lot of fun. This job is a lot of fun.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff you get to do that nobody gets to do. So,
Correct.
all right. So you get out of the military, you go through school, you get all that stuff done. Around when are you starting your move into entrepreneurship in this space?
So no, great question. So I got out when I went to Delta. I left Delta. I worked for a company called Professional Aviation in Atlanta, Georgia, and we did King Air work. We were distributed King Air parts. I did that for a couple of years. Got into sales. Got into rotables management. Rotables management is you tracked what's called a core when it comes off the aircraft. So if you put a brand new actuator on, you take the old one off. The old one's called a core. That core has value. Sometimes those core values can be tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
So I tracked that material when it came off, and I was responsible for sending it to the MRO, having it refurbished and brought back into stock. And I thought that was neat because I got to touch all different kinds of engine components, airframe components, instrumentation. And that's when I set out on my own, and I partnered with a gentleman to start Aviation Enterprises. And we would do that. We would go out, and this was probably early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. And we would buy just big lots of inventory, basically, and they would come in cargo containers, and we would spend months just cataloging what we had and reselling it. So I did that until 2005 when the engine shop came for sale. And I kind of took a leap of faith. I mean, I knew Lycomings were gray and Continentals were gold from A&P school, but that was the knowledge of my recent power plant.
Yeah.
And if you bead blasted the engines, I couldn't tell them apart back then. But lo and behold, I bought an engine shop. So
Yeah.
it's one of those things you just have to figure it out. And Joe, like you just said, there's no better way to do it than get in the middle of it. Theodore Roosevelt has an excellent kind of speech. It's called "The Man in the Arena," and I would encourage you to Google that and read it. But there is no substitution for getting your elbows deep in something and just figuring it out till it worked. The chances of my entrepreneurship in the power plant world were pretty slim. A lot of folks said they gave me 6 months. I had it for 10 years, and I grew it and sold it for a profit. Wound up doing contract work for Continental, so we were building factory motors out of Newnan, Georgia, and I had a blast doing it. And learned, met some great people around the Southeast, announced themselves from their first name and where they're from. So Billy from Bainbridge would call me.
Yeah.
How's my cylinder? And you just had to pick it up from there. So I just met a lot of great people. And then I got back into distribution. And that's what brought me to Embrew Riddle. And when I started my writing career, I really wanted to tell the story. You know, you can name famous aviators: Eddie Rickenbacker, Orville Wilbur Wright, Charles Lindbergh, Jimmy Doolittle. I mean, name one famous aircraft mechanic. Some would say Charles Taylor. He was the Wright brothers mechanic. I actually did not know a lot about Charles Taylor. Shame on me. Until I wrote an article about him for Flying Magazine, and that's when I really got into the nuances of what it was like as an early aircraft mechanic.
Yeah.
But since then, you know, if an aircraft mechanic's famous, it's usually for the wrong thing, right? So,
Right. Yeah.
Joe, to your point, we're the unsung heroes. So I really wanted to tell the story for these guys. So I started writing for Flying. I've since picked up a couple other gigs. I write for Aviation Maintenance. I write for the MBAA, and I do some stuff on my own. I've got my daughter working with me now, and we're doing some social media management for some aviation companies. One of your neighbors, Joe, we're doing.
Yeah.
And so to see her on the hangar floor walking around the airplanes, and I could recognize in her eyes myself, 30 years ago when my dad took me to the airport. So I'm trying to pay it forward. I'm trying to bring her in. She she recently has some good news to share, and it can't go public yet, Joe. But I'll make sure I'll let you know when we can go live with that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
My daughter has got some good news to share. So
Great.
yeah, it's telling airplane mechanic stories. This is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. So I think there's a need for it. I think folks need to understand what we do and how we do it. And I'm just excited for the next generation. Whatever I can do to get to bring those guys and gals up, and especially the vets. We've got a special kinship. When someone's a veteran, you kind of understand what they've been through and where they came from. If I can do anything for you to help push that forward and help these guys and gals transition, man, count me in. I'm all for it.
No, I appreciate it. So you can find your writings, you said, in AIN and the NBAA and that type of stuff. How long have you been writing now?
So I've been writing for 3 years.
Okay.
And I guess the best way to do it is go to my website, scarboroughco.com.
Okay.
And there's a link to the portfolio, and then that's got a link to my other sites that I've been writing for.
Okay, well, and we'll have all that information in the show notes. So if you want to come in and read anything about Richard's writings and kind of dive into the story of the A&P mechanic, that's where you can find it. I'll make sure to have it in the show notes, and also have your information for your LinkedIn up as well. So if people want to reach out to you, feel more than welcome to.
Appreciate that.
Something that really stuck out to me was when you were starting the engine shop, and how people were like, "Oh, we'll give you 6 months."
Sure.
When you're starting out in something new, not just in entrepreneurship, but anything, there are going to be people that doubt you.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter if you're just going into aviation. Maybe you want to lose a couple pounds. Maybe you want to, start saving money. There's something new that you've never been really good at or never showed any like, I don't know, any type of like super motivation to get something done.
Right.
You got to realize that there are going to be people that doubt you, and you just got to realize that you got to put that stuff aside and be a firm believer in yourself and take that drive that you have and prove them wrong. I love the fact that you're like, and I was here for 10 years and I sold it for a profit. That's phenomenal.
Sure. Sure.
I think we look at the outside, and some people do it out of caring for you. Maybe they have some prior experience in the space and they couldn't do it. Or they're just trying to protect you from failing. But I think that the biggest thing there is kind of like you were moving into this space where you're going to be doing something new, and you knew that there was a high possibility of failure, but you weren't afraid to fail. You just wanted to try. And failing forward, probably I'm sure there's a lot of hiccups. I run through that crap all the time, not only with my company, but with the podcast and with the nonprofit, and with my weight and with all this other stuff. You're going to run through hiccups. You're going to hit hard times. And in the beginning of the show, we talked about understanding how to get through things, because you're inevitably going to fail. You're going to run through those things, and understanding that if you fail forward and learn from your mistakes and try again, you never fail unless you quit. And sometimes quitting is the option.
It is. But it's the path you have to take. I have an older daughter, Mia. I've got a younger daughter, Maggie, who writes for me, and she's written some stuff that we've put on Medium on the business of people, black and white thinking. But what I wanted to instill in them, and what I took pride in the fact that graduating college at 50 years old, is we don't fail. We either win or we learn, and you have to be able to stretch your comfort zone. I think the internet meme that goes around is "Don't be afraid to suck at something new." You're not going to be any good when you start. I mean, there's some prodigies and that just pick up a baseball bat and automatically start hitting home runs. But that's not the norm. The norm is you gotta hack at it and you gotta get in there. And I think with entrepreneurs, I heard a great saying, and I wish I could attribute it to somebody, but I've said it for years. Entrepreneurs feel like they could charge hell with an empty water pistol and win. So you got to just remove fail from your vocabulary and just accept no substitutes. Now, that could mean redirection. If you're heading to a path that doesn't have a visible end game in sight, redirect. Doesn't mean you failed. It's a redirection. So
Right.
I encourage anybody, like if you want to open up a bake stand or bake cookies or start writing, writers write. If you want to write, start writing. Mechanics fix things. If you want to get into aircraft mechanics, show up at an airport, volunteer to help, start out washing airplanes. If you're a young person and you want to get your name out there. I counseled a gentleman the other day that was leaving the PR space and wanted to be a writer. And I told him, I said, do you have a local regional airport near your house? I said, just go show up and start hanging around and write your own stories and start putting them out there. I know, what did you observe? Did they jack an airplane up and start swinging the gear? Write about that. Write about what it sounded like, what it looked like. Write about what the Skydraw smelled like, what the 5606, the red oil, what it smelled like. Write all this down, and then just put it out there. If nobody reads it, then nobody reads it. But eventually, you'll find your voice, and you'll find your path, and you'll find your audience.
Yeah.
What is it that people say? Your vibe attracts your tribe. So
Yeah.
just put out positivity, and the best way I've found that is instead of saying I want to go viral over a night or I want 1 million views or I want this, focus on the work. If your content's good, you won't have to promote it. People will come to you.
Right. Eventually, that's what happens. There's
Yep.
all this hearsay, or not hearsay, but there's a saying. It's like the overnight success, and you don't see that. There's no such thing as overnight success. There's a lot of hard work that inevitably turn into this big success. Like, say anybody that you found that is an influencer online or on YouTube or any of that, look at their content before they ever blew up. They've got thousands and thousands and thousands upon thousands of videos and writers that blow up or anything like that. Like, they have tons and tons of articles put out. And there was that one article that really put them on the map, or that one story that put them on the map. And now they've got all this content to back it up. But that's all the hard work. There's a lot of stuff that happens in the background before you ever make it. Just like being a mechanic. I mean, I run my own business. I can fix any jet that you put in front of me. I can fix it. But it's not like I woke up and was like, I can fix jets. It took a lot of failure, took a lot of, sergeants telling me I sucked at doing safety wire and cutting my safety wire all throughout the aircraft. A lot of strip bolts, a lot of strip screws that I had to drill out. The only reason I'm so good at drilling screws out is because I stripped out hundreds and thousands of freaking screws. And a lot of those were like in over like a 2-month span. No lie. Right. They took my drill away. Yeah. They took my drill away and gave me a screwdriver and, what is that thing called?
The hurdy-gurdy, speed handle?
Yeah, they gave me a speed handle and said, you use a speed handle until you can figure out how to not strip a screw out. And they gave me a drill with a drill bit and taught me how to drill straight. Like, I'm only good at that stuff because I really sucked at taking out screws on the first try, And I mean, I've learned all this stuff over time, and it's not an overnight success. And I'm still learning how to run a business. I'm still learning how to be a leader of a team. Be it a small team, it's still a team, And I fail constantly. It's not all wins here. We celebrate the wins and we learn from our mistakes and we continue to move forward, and so, no, I love that.
The biggest thing you do is you support each other, though. And that we win together or we learn together, but ultimately we're together. So, when you were going through those hard times drilling those screws, and I've got hundreds, if not thousands, of hours behind the speed handle when they would call panel parties, there's always somebody that's willing to wander over and say, have you tried leaning into it? Or and if you're in it straight, you're much more apt to get a bite than if you're down. Um, Sometimes you need to get leverage and you need to get up over the screw. But you learn that from people that 10 years ago stripped out a ton of screws and had to drill them out.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's a reason they sell hundreds of thousands of easy outs. Is everybody's doing it, man. Everybody's doing it, brother.
It's part of the process. You've got to
100%.
learn. And I had a guy who used to just watch me struggle until I got it done, and then he would come and show me how to do it right. And he always thought it was really funny. I never thought it was too funny, but I was like,
moment, man.
I was like, where were you 3 hours ago?
Right? It's never fun in the moment.
Yeah, but learning through that process and having other people. I like the fact that you're saying it is as a team.
Yeah.
If you know already, reach out to the guy who does it and give them a hand.
Yeah.
Don't
be afraid to say, I'm struggling with this. Raise your hand. I'm struggling with this.
Yeah.
And also everybody wants the mission to succeed.
Yeah. I think for a long time in the industry, people were afraid to share their knowledge because they didn't want to get their job taken away from them.
Sure.
They like being the hydraulic guy. They didn't want to teach anybody how to flare a freaking line or any of that, or do it as good as they did because they didn't want to lose that job. And I think that mentality is slowly going away, but we've got a massive shortage on mechanics. And we've got to give them the techniques as this older generation starts to wing out of maintenance. We've got to teach these newer guys how to do this because it's going to be a long learning curve without the knowledge. And so if you are finely tuned in what you do, it is your responsibility to share that knowledge with these younger guys that are coming up. And I highly encourage that if you're out there and you're listening to the show, if you know the tips and tricks of the trade and you're really good at what you do, pass that knowledge on to somebody else. Because not everybody's going to say, hey, I need help. Some people are just hard-headed. 19-year-old to 35-year-old man full of testosterone doesn't want help. And so it is our responsibility as the older generation to impart that knowledge onto these guys, whether they want it or not.
Yeah, I got a little more gray in my beard than you do, Joe. So a friend of mine, Mav, who's over in the UK, we're doing some work for the TC Alliance, and we call it our Gray Beard Initiative.
Awesome.
We're passing this knowledge along, and to you graybeards out there, just remember somebody taught you. Somebody took time to bring you under their wing and show you the way. And now's not the time to sit on information. Now's time to bring folks into the circle because these planes aren't going to fix themselves, so we need bodies.
For sure. Well, Rick, I think that's all we got for the show today. I wanted to say I really appreciate you coming out. I love your story. I think that you're incredibly inspiring through what you've done in the industry, what you're doing now. And I really look forward to reading more about you, reading about what you're putting out. And if you are interested in any of the stories, guys, please go out. I'm going to be putting his information onto the show notes so that you can dig in there and read a little bit more about aviation maintenance. So I'm really excited about it. Thanks a lot for coming out, Richard.
Thanks again, Joe. It's honestly a pleasure to be here, and I'm honored. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Guys, that's the show today. I appreciate you guys listening. Please don't forget, if you like the show, if it made you think, please like and share it. You're going to be able to find all the information on Rick and what he's doing in the aviation industry now in our show notes. And that's it, guys. This is Flight Level Zero. I'm Joe Peebles, your host, and we're out.